Welcome back to Today and Tomorrow, the podcast where you explore ideas that are shaping the future. And today we're diving into a topic that's more relevant than ever: innovation resilience. In a world of rapid change, how do businesses, industries, individuals, politicals, and so on, not only survive but continue to innovate? This is a very big topic, and I'm glad not to tackle this alone. So, it's great to have you again with us, Dieter. How are you?
Oh, absolutely great, especially when we talk about such an important issue, because I realize that I'm in that field for quite a while already, and I realize how urgent it is and how things are building up. But again, like you, I'm happy I'm not doing have to do this alone, because and to have another great expert.
Of course.
Jean-Michel, we met in Malta recently, and we had a great chat about this issue, and realized that there we had a lot in common and a lot of differences,
That's innovation.
and a lot of disrupting ideas were coming from this conversation. And so I already had the pleasure of being live with him on his podcast, and now we have him here, so we can continue our conversation about this really important issue of innovation resilience. Welcome, Jean-Michel.
Thank you so much for the invite, guys. Alex, it's great to be here. Dieter, thank you for the heads up. And I have to say, it's rare to find people who are interested in the nuances of quantum physics at like 11:30 in the evening after a conference. So this is, I guess, kind of why we're here as a result. So I'm happy to continue this conversation with perhaps a little less inebriation. But hey, maybe we'll get to some better outcomes or worse. We'll see. I don't know.
Jean-Michel, before we start, would you like to introduce yourself to our viewers, listeners?
Sure, Alex. So hi everyone out there. For those who don't know me, I'm a fintech consultant. I've been doing this since I had hair. I'm very bald now. Originally, a background in enterprise IT, implementing ERPs and spending some time in the cyber world. But I've been a blockchain degenerate ever since I saw Bitcoin in 2011. So I'm not a crypto guy. I'm not a meme coin guy. I'm a guy that believes in blockchain technology for its capability to better the world.
So you're an innovation guy.
That's I think a good way to look at it. Impact is really what drives me at the end of the day.
And the good thing is that he is not stuck with blockchain, even that's its core thing. So when you talk to him about AI or about quantum computing, he is knowledgeable about everything, and you can take a deep dive into all these issues. Of course, he always will come back to blockchain and fintech, but okay, these are the little flaws everybody has, I think.
If we talk about innovation, about especially what we're going to talk about today in today's episode, innovation and resilience are often talked about separately. But how would you define innovation resilience, and why do you think it's so crucial in today's world?
Okay, so I am before everything else a technologist. So I believe that tech just makes the world better. But I also
Mhm.
believe that it doesn't come without a cost. That's why there's cameras in my glasses and my watch is analog, right? Because I don't want to be asleep and have some sort of light wake me up halfway through my nap, right? So just because we can make something digital and we can make something more efficient and we can make something better, it doesn't mean there isn't a cost. A fantastic example, a practical example would be DeepSeek, right? So
Yeah.
we have a new AI model, and the AI model is more efficient. Great, all well and good. What's the cost of that? The cost is you lose all your data rights and data sovereignty in the same way you do if you hold a TikTok app. Essentially, you're downloading and feeding Chinese spyware and malware. On the flip side, you're doing the same thing with Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook. We would like to think that there is some sort of democratic control on the latter, The reality is, under the Patriot Act, means absolutely nothing. But it doesn't mean just because we're able to feed these systems and they're gonna have a net positive impact on our lives. That's what I'm trying to say.
So we need to learn that there is not a one-way solution, but we have to think about different spheres, different dimensions to talk when we talk about tech. If it is blockchain, if it is AI, you have to think about everything that is involved here. So in different scenarios and different perspectives, and not just say, "Well, DeepSeek is from China, so we don't like it anymore."
And the big problem from my point is that, of course, we in the tech world, we nerds, as you refer to it, Jean-Michel, we are open to innovation. Maybe not fully open, but we believe that we can tackle it. The problem is that it's the impact it has on everybody's life that are not in this world, because they only realize that things are changing rapidly, that their jobs are at risk, or they believe their jobs are at risk. For some, it will be like that. So this creates very easily unstable societies. And that's a huge danger we face with. And the other issue is, and I know we, Jean-Michel, we agree on that, that's the greed factor. Because when you're using this technology, there will always people that only see their own advantage and that will take that to the utmost, and will have the potential of creating really big harm. And we need to find a way to tackle with that. We need to get people innovation ready in the whole of the society, by also finding ways to tackle the risks without limiting the opportunities too much.
And that's, I'm just going to jump in for a second. That is whew, the hardest balance I think humanity will ever need to find in terms of equilibrium. And the reason is, like, in my opinion, jobs are already at risk, already severely at risk, right? It's just a matter of time.
Well, I actually yesterday evening I was at a meeting of the creative industry where we were discussing the impact of AI, and say most of the people, the jobs of the traditional jobs will be at risk within this and the coming year.
Yeah, to some extent, yes, but I don't think it's going to be as it will be much more impactful in the coming years. I'll tell you why. So for example, you'd never hire anybody that doesn't use a smartphone,
Mm.
right? Whether they're a delivery driver or they're a waiter, regardless, right? Because they need a smartphone to do their job. That's using AI. So that's forcing people into the AI bucket, which is fine, all well and good. But we're going to arrive at a point, and I think Optimus is a good example of this, Tesla Optimus, right? We're going to arrive at a point where these menial jobs, which are fundamental to society, are going to be not only these menial jobs, but things like things like in the manufacturing industry are going to be replaced by robotics, and the only people able to afford these kinds of innovation are those with some proper dry powder to throw around, because no one's going to spend 30, 40 grand on a robot unless you've got a little bit of extra cash lying around. So if you've the people are going to be investing in robots the same way they invest in Airbnbs at the moment. That's what I'm trying to say,
Mm.
right?
Just to give our audience a little heads up, for everyone who does not know the word Optimus, Optimus is the robot from Tesla, so from Elon Musk and co. That is shaking up a little bit the industry. There were news articles that it's used in automotive manufacturing. There were some very staged videos where Optimus was cooking and so on and so on. But still, I agree with you. Robotics is the next big thing that will change our lives, and where we have to think about how can we adapt to it, or how do we not get lost. And this is very crucial. Hmm?
And we see the speed in which it is happening. When you look at the old Boston Dynamic videos with their walking machines, that was about 2 years ago, and so they were.
The first Boston Dynamics video I think came out like 2013, 2012, if memory serves something. So
But
it's been a while.
I talk about these advanced walking machines that did the flips and stuff like that. The machines looked very clumsy, and they only were limited to their walking capacities. And now look at these humanoid robots we see now. Well, they still walk a little bit clumsy, and they touch things looking clumsily and slowly. But there was a huge step in between these walking machines and these more overall Optimus type robots that are that we see today, and it will be a matter of another 2 years. They probably will almost walk and touch and behave like we do.
There's a wonderful video called 13 Years of Robotics, where they cutted every step of robotics of the Boston Dynamic next to each other. And it's quite impressive in this 2 minutes video, I think it was, or 90 seconds.
Please share this video. I want to see this. It sounds
Of
awesome.
course, it was wonderful. If you see the clumsy ones and then you see them dancing and flossing and everything, and you think, okay, 13 years is nothing compared
It's not
to
that long.
it is.
But
But
share it
but
with me too, because I haven't seen that video either.
I will mail it to you. But I have a question. We were talking about the change in the world. We were talking about how industries are changing, how companies will adopt AI, robotics, and so on. You were talking about the loss of jobs. And to be honest, this is a little bit frightening for a lot of people. But still, we can't stay frightened and say, well, innovation is off the table now. We will not do this anymore. It sounds terrible. So, what do you think? What are factors that allow companies and employees, humans, every one of us, to stay a little bit more innovative in such an uncertain and fast, disruptive time?
Look, the ideal solution is always specific to the particular problem, right? So, um, in terms of robotics, there are only two solutions in the way I see it. Solution number one, you tax the robots and you offset income tax with robot tax. Solution number two, you create bonds, robo bonds that allow the public to buy in and generate constant increasing value over time. Those, in my view, are the only two things which need to be done.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. I cannot really add anything on what you just said. The problem will be how can we handle it when people realize a short notice profit or a short range profit, they will adopt it easily. If they are confronted with fears, it will take a much longer time. So that's one of the reasons why you can't predict how fast an innovation will take to be adopted. You always have this hockey stick developments, because people first look at it and are afraid and skeptic, and suddenly you have enough power, and suddenly it takes off. And to predict this particular point is very difficult to forecast.
And to add another opinion on this, of course, it would be wonderful if everyone would benefit from the innovations by investing into bonds and so on and so on. But a lot of people don't know how to invest, don't know how to use digital tools,
The
and so
pension
on.
funds, the pension funds will be backed by robo bonds.
Okay. But still, what do you think? There's still a digital divide in many of these areas, not only talking about robots, but talking about AI, talking about blockchain, your favorite. How could we not lose people who look at it and say, well, it's not for me, but the world isn't stopping?
That's a question of abstracting away the complexity, right? Like the thing about nerds, and I love nerds. I am one myself. But we're often guilty of overcomplicating what should be rather simple. Everyone here has a bank account. Everyone in the world, in the Western world, has a bank account. less than 1% of people know how banks make money, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly how it should be, because that's the nature of man. You cannot be an expert at everything. It's absolutely impossible. So blockchainers, I think, are guilty of this more than everything else. It's like,
Oh yeah.
oh, hey, there's this acronym and that acronym, and it's like you have to have a PhD to be able to use and understand it, and that's why we don't have true mass adoption yet. But that cycle has started. But that's a different conversation. Um, I don't know. I'm of the opinion that robotics is, and this is where I think the greed factor, which Dieter mentioned earlier, which will be detrimental, right?
Mhm.
The only this can go in one of two ways. Either robotics bonds, equity, whatever financial instrument you want to call it, are going to be bought up by the BlackRocks of this world and the Vanguards of this world, and everyone else is going to be pushed out.
Mhm.
Or governments who already have the pressure to realize that their pension funds are failing, are going to say, hey, you know what, this might be a solution, and they'll go down that route. But in doing so, that requires them to put the people before themselves, and politicians aren't generally very good at that.
Mhm.
Well, one factor I want to add in this discussion is the factor of time and of acceleration and speed, because we see now with DeepSeek how suddenly there's a completely new model, cheaper model. Even I'm not trusting the full idea. I think if that's right, that they were more or less stealing the data from OpenAI, and of course, then they can work with it much more efficiently with a lot with lower costs. So we have to see how this was how this really comes out, and what really the impact of the technology will be, and what the impact will be on the development in the US, and what it is going to do there, the Sputnik event. So this has a huge potential to speeding it up more, and the technology means the technology itself become faster and faster when we now come with quantum computing. So people will not have time to lean back and breathe, because the innovation will just come back to back and bombard everything. And I think this will be the point where we really have to be very careful not to run into really tremendous problems, because people will just be washed away.
Look, in terms of quantum, like I see the risks. Of course, I'm not a quantum expert, but when Jensen Huang says, "Listen, we have another 100 years until a quantum issue becomes a real threat," I'd give the guy the benefit of the doubt. I mean, so CEO of Nvidia, right? But in terms of AI, um, ChatGPT got almost its entire data set from the free and open internet, right? Mostly, including Reddit,
Mhm.
New York Times, which both have a court case now against them. So I'm not really worried about the theft of data that's publicly available. What I'm worried about is the ability to consume micro actions across a vast majority of the populace and micro thoughts
Mhm.
in concurrency, and amalgamating that to be used as a weapon, in the same way that, in my opinion, TikTok was a weapon. In my opinion, we never had the idea of more than two genders after TikTok. That's a TikTok thing, at least on this side of the pond.
Of course, things like TikTok and uh, these are opinion platforms, and they, of course, have a huge impact. But they only picking up things that are already with discussed in the society, and they only make it bigger and louder. So I'm very and usually they only work in their own echo chambers. So, on the other hand, we must not be overestimate the impact of social media channels, because it, the impact comes from our reactions. Because something very dangerous is happening there, and we don't know how to deal with it, and then we start acting and arguing against it, and not realizing that it's us who making it big. Um, and that's a huge problem. We yeah, we need to tackle that. If we can control this discussion, then get used to it, and and cook it down to a more reasonable level, we will realize that the impact also will become uh, more foreseeable and handleable.
And there's more to it than the echo camber. We and TikTok was a little bit of an example for this as well. We get a little bit too dependent on it, especially when you talk about AI. And if we have a look at it, how many people are clinging to it and can't work without it anymore. This is another big problem.
That's a perfect point, Alexander. Perfect point. And like I'll tie into what Dieter mentioned earlier, okay? And I'll come back to this. So so how many of you have heard of Douyin? So Douyin is the Chinese version of TikTok. Okay. Now we're three technologists in a room, and we're talking about the impact of AI. And like I didn't know the actual. I always knew about this concept, but I didn't know about the actual name until a couple of months ago. I happened to meet someone. She had this conversation. She showed me the app. But so we know for a fact that the algorithm of Douyin and TikTok are two completely different things. We know for a fact that Douyin has a limit on the amount of time someone can spend on it, hence limiting the impact of the dependency. We also know to fully appreciate the true impact of things, of massive innovations like AI and social media, you require, and this is what Dieter was going on about earlier, you require cross-functional expertise across from many different perspectives. And only when you're able to pull all those perspectives together can you say, okay, listen, guys, this is what we should do to make the right choice forward. But in order to do that, the people in power need to say, hey guys, listen, we need these perspectives. What do you think? And it's against human nature, against human greed to relinquish power. That's the fundamental problem. The relinquishment of greed and power.
And another problem is that we can't think really holistically, because we can't foresee the impact our things we are doing is having on the entire on the entire society, because we only see our personal benefit we take from it, and we are trained for our short-term benefit because that made us survive for the last couple of thousand years of human history. This was giving us an advantage over our competitors, and made us survive, and secured our families. And that's how we are still thinking today. And that's something, well, we will not be able to overcome, but we have to be very careful in how we address that. And we need to consider this and have to be aware of our limitations in order to optimize our impact in a positive way. And we have to learn that only when other people are benefiting too, in the long run, we all are more prosperous and satisfied and secure our existence.
And this is where I think we as individuals kind of differ from the majority of the world, right? And the I think the best example is social media is the best example, right? So if we look at Francis Hogan, who's one of my favorite whistleblowers, right? So what did Francis do? Francis said, let's A/B test the Facebook home feeds of I think it was six or 700,000 people in each group, if memory serves. And they said, let's skew group A with positive information, and let's skew group B with negative information. Naturally, the people in group B were spent more time on the platform, because when you go to a shitty restaurant, you tell more people than you do about a good one, right? So, so what does it mean? Facebook is a business. It is there to make money, and it makes money by serving ads. So, its goal is to serve ads, even if it makes society unhappier. And so and social media now has been around for, I don't know, what is it, guys? 15 years?
Yeah, a little bit more,
A
I
little bit
think.
more, a little bit more.
In
It
a
makes sense.
shorter.
A little bit more. Okay, so we've had, let's say we've had like 18, 20 years, okay, to figure this out. Okay, nobody's done anything about it. No, it's barely even a story.
That brings us a little bit back to our main topic of innovation resilience. If we look at the past, if we look at the present, if we look at how we handle stuff like social media at the moment, how our world is changing. We talked about robotics, we talked about blockchain, we talked about AI. This is much more than social media. So how can we tackle all those challenges? What do you think? What should we do as a society, as companies, as whatever we are, to not follow the path of the past?
I wouldn't call myself an academic, far from it. But as much as I, let's say, hate the idea of a piece of paper defining the worth of someone, there are some brilliant ideas that have sort of come out of that system, and one of those formations to me is think tanks. And I think the way that we do think tanks nowadays is wrong. I think we get a lot of people who have particular technological backgrounds to discuss and technological issues, and same thing in finance. We get finance guys to discuss finance issues. But what we forget is that all of these things affect absolutely everyone. And a ballerina might have just as much of a decent input in terms of how AI should be used as we would, right? Because she's exposed to AI almost as much as the average person anyway, right? So the perspective is entirely different. So I think we need to be smarter in how we stick together these think tanks and control groups to predefine some guidelines. But that I would almost say is a step two in terms of innovation. If we take AI specifically, we need some commandments. We need a couple of simple guidelines that the world can agree on. That, like, for example, AI should do no harm to a human, right? Some basic stuff that whether you're on the left, whether you're on the right, we can sort of all agree. I think once we have that basis, once we create our constitution, an AI constitution, I think we can build around that. That's how I look at it.
And if we build on this, just imagine the podcast is called Today and Tomorrow. So we talked about guidelines, and you're as we already found out, the innovation guy. So how would you think tomorrow should look like? What would a world, if you could imagine it, in your opinion, would look like? How would blockchain, cryptocurrency, how would AI, robotics, and so on integrate into our world? Would it be a tool? Would it be a part of it? Would it dominate it? I don't know. What would you say tomorrow should or would look like?
Okay, so in the optimistic outcome is the Jetsons. That's the
Yeah.
optimistic outcome, you have a pipe in your kitchen, that's where you receive your mail, you have a hoverboard, you have flying cars, everything talks together, everything works. That's the
Mm.
ideal reality.
Yeah.
The more realistic outcome, I think, is much more Terminator.
Okay.
So I think there's many ways to explain this, but I think I'll use, let's go with Neuralink.
Mhm.
Okay. So, in the same way the smartphone forced people to abandon their Nokia 3310s, Neuralink will force everyone in.
Mhm.
It will be it won't be mandatory. It will not be opt-in. If you do not get one, you will be poor. It's simple.
Mhm.
And I think when you create a paradigm like that, it, it becomes so Orwellian to lose your mental sovereignty, because that's what it is.
Mhm.
It is literally the loss of mental sovereignty.
Mhm.
And if we see that blockchains can get hacked, right? Everyone says blockchain's so secure, it's the most, it's the, it's immutable, it's
Yeah.
transparent. Yes, it's true, but that's generally speaking. There are caveats, and you have to understand and appreciate the nuances to appreciate that those caveats exist, right?
And also, if I uh, jump in here, because we don't know what quantum computing will bring. It looks, from what we know today, blockchain looks secure, but we don't know what hidden backdoors suddenly will be opened by the use of quantum computing. So we have to be very careful on in this aspect too.
Yes, so but like again, in terms of quantum, even the experts themselves sort of disagree on the nuances. So I'm confident we have a little bit more time. The threat is real, right? But I mean,
Mhm.
look at this conversation, for example. Like I'm moving around, and there's AI on my camera, and it's tracking my head. That's how deeply ingrained it is, and people barely know it's there. That's the scary part, right? We're much farther along than we think. So it's when we like technology is agnostic, inherently agnostic. Okay, and man is corruptible. It absolutely is, right? Um, if you grab a glass of water and you fill it up, and you stick in like a million molecules of probiotics, right? And you grab one molecule of cyanide, you destroy the whole thing, right? So if we apply that same sort of thinking and logic to what AI has the potential to do, I mean, let's face it, how many steps removed are we from social score in the West? Not too many,
No.
not too many. You know, there are. Luckily, we've gotten some sort of peace of mind that CBDCs won't be coming anytime soon in the West, but it doesn't mean that won't change with the next guy. And that inherent there's fundamentally that's the problem. The system was built for a time and a place where there was no digital remittance of information. There were some very core basic principles, which was the Constitution, and then we came up with this idea of a House and the Senate and blah 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 and blah 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 and blah blah blah. But the way that I think the only way for humanity to save itself is for that to fundamentally change, and for that to fundamentally change, you have to change the money, and that's why Bitcoin.
And we have one fundamental problem dealing with it, and the discussions, and especially when people are afraid and insecure, tend to become very emotional, and that's another problem we are faced with. Because yesterday I had a conversation with a guy, and we were not that far apart from each other, and I was trying to build bridges by saying, "Hey, okay," and when no, he just didn't listen, because there was this emotional point where where it just clicked, and he came back into his stereotype because he was so roused by by the feeling, and that's something, and that's a problem we are facing, actually already started facing right now, that people are not listening anymore because they are so touched, emotionally touched by it. And this is really a big problem, creates a big problem because you can't explain things anymore, you can't create compromise, and you're killing debates. But you need the debate and the exchange in order uh, to build up a positive condition to accept things and to move things forward in a right direction. And I think that's a problem we actually are facing, started facing today. How can we get back to reasonable debates and listening to it and listening to each other and learning from each other?
I think this is one of the biggest questions we have to face in the future.
Definitely. And that's basically when Jean-Michel, when you were talking about think tanks. So sorry, I have to add now a little advertising block because that's what the Diplomatic World Institute is striving towards when we are talking about the Campus Mundi and the idea. It's a very early stage, but that's the idea is bringing people together, reasonable people from all sectors, from all and start talking about the future and start developing solutions together in the end, not in the beginning, but in the end, maybe we can help creating solutions. And that's the entire idea about it, not seeing it isolated, trying to approach it in a more holistic way. I know it's a huge task, and I don't know how far we will get, but I think it's just worth trying it, and we need to do it. And not only we of course we need to cooperate with everybody who is picking up or thinking independently into the same direction.
But what would be your call out to our audience, Jean-Michel? What would you say should happen next? So, for a final conclusion, to say it like this, what would you want to tell them what to do?
Okay, well, as individuals, I I guess the same thing I'd advise almost anyone, right? Which is become a better version of yourself. Understand that the more you know, the more you realize how much you don't know, and opposing opinions can only give you different perspectives. But that's let's say 15 years of work summed up in a couple of words. For companies, I would say I would say with AI, with blockchain, with innovation, be careful who you buy snake oil from. That is the major bits of advice I would give you. I think there's a lot of people out there that really pretend to know way much more than they do, and some of them are just fantastically great at talking, and companies end up falling in a great hole as a result. But I think the message I'd like to give is to governments and companies, right? And this, so let's sort of tie this in together. One of the greatest forms of untapped value which companies currently have is their community. Okay, if companies are smart about it, they will start monetizing their community by sticking them into some sort of digital channel which Google doesn't have control over, right? Not like a mailing list, for example. Let's say let's call it a super wallet, right? Which is um, so once these communities have grown to a point where they have some sort of critical mass, the companies would very easily be able to define consensus in a decentralized way. Not necessarily how you store the data, forget the blockchain here. It's just about defining consensus in the right way about whatever the issue may be, right? Let's say, and if you're able to tie in an initiative like this to a governmental approach, I think the world would change in a very beautiful way.
Thank you for those insights. Dieter, what are your takeaways of our today's conversation?
I fully agree with you, Jean-Michel. And the only thing we can do is we have to live with it. We can't change it. We only can try doing making the best out of it. And I think we had a very good approach on how it can happen. And now we only need people to accept it, and this will be the big issue. Yeah, thank you, Jean-Michel. I think it was a really fruitful conversation, and well, not really diverse, but I think we covered really a lot in this. And We talked about a lot of things that could create a lot of pessimism, but I think we are not pessimistic at all. I think we found a way of how there's a good sense of optimism, and I think that's what the future will be. We will handle it with ups and downs, but in the end, I'm very optimistic that we will solve it. We only need to work on it, and yeah, and we all do.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the interesting conversation, especially so early in the morning. I leave. I think I'll leave with one last little mental thought, just and just for the sake of the point. I'm not Elon Musk's greatest fan. I love him for some reasons. I hate him for other reasons. But I think one of the best things he ever said is something along the lines of finding perfect equilibrium means a situation where everyone is equally pissed off, right? So I think in order for us to find the best balance for innovation, resilience, and the benefit of humanity, we need to find a point where innovation pisses off everyone equally.
Wonderful last words. And with this, thank you again, Jean-Michel. I think this conversation, in my opinion, has given us a lot to think about. You've challenged so many fundamental ideas, highlighted so much that is still to be done. And I think we have a lot of work to do. Again, Dieter as well, thank you. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for being here. And of course, thank you to our listeners, to our viewers. I think there's no doubt today that today's discussion raised some thoughts about necessary questions, to be honest. And if we want to shape the future rather than just react to it, we need to rethink our very foundations and the foundations of how we innovate. I hope you enjoyed this podcast, this episode. Make sure to subscribe, leave a review. Join us next time when we keep exploring what's coming today and tomorrow. And then my last words are until then, stay curious and to add up to the main issue today, stay resilient. Thank you very much, guys.
And thank you, Alex, of course.
It was my pleasure.